Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Oh, I forgot to change the title on this. This is actually the Southwest Regions meeting. We are holding this meeting for the Tucson, Phoenix, Navajo, and Albuquerque regions. As you all know, the National American Indian Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center is part of the US ATTC network. Oh, thank you, Will. I thought I was sharing my screen, but apparently not. You can see it now? Yes? Okay. The National American Indian and Alaska Native ATTC is supported by a grant from SAMHSA. The content of this event is the creation of the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, Health and Human Services, or the National American Indian and Alaska Native ATTC. Here is our agenda for today. Our presenter, Christina Pacheco, has very graciously offered to get us started in a good way by giving us a blessing. We will stop recording for the blessing and will one of the things we also like to do in our meetings is to, although we are meeting virtually today, to take this time to acknowledge the land and pay respect to the indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken over and inhabited. If you would take a moment to read our land acknowledgement, which was written by 3 members of the Native Center for Behavioral Health staff, who are also members of the Meskwaki tribal community in Iowa. I lost my controls there. Sorry about that. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our partners from SAMHSA. We have Brittany Barber Alexander, Will Longanetti, and Paul. Paul, help me pronounce your last name.
Kalkbrenner. It's not as bad as it looks.
Kalkbrenner. I wasn't sure about the CH there. I think that's everyone from SAMHSA. We also have our ATTC program manager, Steve Steiny, is here. And of course, Kathleen Tomlin, our consultant. As always, today, after today's meeting, you'll receive links to the recording of the meeting, any presentation slides, information about how to request and receive CEUs, and we do GPRA these things, so we'll post that in the chat later on in the meeting, but you'll also receive that link in the follow-up email. And we request that you please take a few moments to fill it out and let us know how we're doing. And I am very pleased to introduce today's speaker. Christina Pacheco is an enrolled member of the Pueblo of Laguna, where she lives and works in New Mexico. She's a licensed alcohol and drug abuse counselor in New Mexico and has more than 20 years of experience in the field of substance abuse treatment and prevention. She's also a tribal healing to wellness court specialist with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. And she helped launch that tribal healing to wellness court, correct? In 2007, is that right? And that was granted mentor court status in 2017 by the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, Drug Court Initiatives. She also provides training and technical assistance to other Native communities as a consultant. And today she's going to share with us her expertise on healing to wellness tribal courts. It's all yours, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. So to officially, Guatsiopa, Hinume Chris Pacheco, Guaikama, Zenahanu Sharsko Ashti, and for my Anishinaabe family, Buju. So good morning or good afternoon to everybody. My name is Chris Pacheco, like Meg said. I am a Tribal Healing to Wellness Court Specialist with Tribal Law and Policy Institute. I've been with, excuse me, TLPI for 3 years now. And like I said, prior to working with TLPI, I worked for my tribe. So I'm coming to you from my own homelands in the Pueblo of Laguna. And so prior to that, I worked for the tribe. I was a supervising probation officer for 6 years, which is the most interesting job I've ever had. Trying being a probation officer in your own home community. That was interesting. My parents didn't really like that job for me. And then I moved on back to clinical work where I worked as a lead counselor with our behavioral health. And then I eventually became program manager for the last 4 years of my time with the tribe. So it was a very good, I was very, very happy and proud to work for my tribe, partly because they paid for my college education. So it was really nice that I could give back in that way. So I don't have very many slides. I was hoping that we could just really have a really good open conversation. And as I was speaking with Meg earlier, I was just kind of letting her know that unfortunately, there is not a lot of data, current data on tribal healing to wellness courts. We at TLPI get that question asked almost every day of like, how many tribes have healing to wellness courts? Well, we can kind of anecdotally say from the TA requests that we get and the tribes that we are currently working with and the tribes that we have worked with in the past. And then we also can base that on the number of tribes that are being funded to do the various types of problem-solving courts, which include juvenile healing to wellness courts, which are currently funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Then there are also those tribes that are funded by the CTAS funding, which is Consolidate Tribal Assistance Solicitation monies. And then also the family drug treatment courts, which we have a couple of family healing to wellness courts. Those are also funded by OJJDP. And then we have the adult healing to wellness courts, which are funded by BJA. And then also SAMHSA. SAMHSA funds adult healing to wellness courts primarily for the treatment purposes. So there is a variety of funding out there that tribes can take part in healing to wellness courts. So it's really hard to say. I just got back from Oklahoma, where the Chickasaw Nation is getting ready to start a healing to wellness court. I will be working with the Oneida Nation tomorrow, and then I'll also be working with my own, my neighbors, the Pueblo of Acoma, tomorrow on their juvenile healing to wellness court. So it's a variety of tribes that have been in existence. My own tribe, the Pueblo of Laguna, has had our Healing to Wellness Court for 15 years. We celebrated our 15th anniversary this year, and they're still going strong. And I don't participate as much as I used to. I used to be a coordinator in that wellness court, but they are still going strong. You know, just like a lot of programs, tribal Healing to Wellness courts got affected by COVID. Where we were able to go and do in-person court staffing with our partners, our multidisciplinary teams, or we were able to do in-person status hearings for our participants. Those all got shut down. And we just now have some tribes who are just now returning to in-person court hearings, in-person staffing, because tribal lands were shut down. I know from my own tribe, we had, you know, checkpoints, we had, you know, non-tribal or non-residents not being allowed on tribal lands, and that was for our safety. So things are just now opening back up. And so that was one of the things that impacted Healing to Wellness courts was recruitment. And so a lot, you know, whereas we were getting a lot of, you know, individuals being recommended for Healing to Wellness courts, now we only have, you know, very few. One of the tribes I'm currently working with, they only have 3 participants right now, and they're trying to expand their recruitment. So before I go on, let me share with you a little bit about who TLPI is and what we do at the Healing to Wellness Court. Can I share my screen?
There you go. You should be able to do it now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So this is TLPI. This is we are the Tribal Healing to Wellness Courts project. We provide training and technical assistance to those tribes who are planning and wanting to implement a Healing to Wellness Court. We also provide training to those courts that are currently providing Healing to Wellness Court for sustainability. You know, those individual, and you don't have to be a grantee, you don't have to be a BJA grantee, an OJJDP grantee. If you are just interested, you know, just give us a ring or give us an email and we'll provide you with some resources. We are now getting to a point where we can now return to going to on-site training, but we've been doing a lot of virtual training. We also have several Healing to Wellness Court publications and webinar series. We just got done celebrating Drug Court Month, and we had 2 Healing to Wellness Court graduates to come and speak with us or speak for us. It was great. One of the Wellness Court graduates, she closed out our series, is a very near and dear friend of mine. And she is now a peer recovery support specialist in New Mexico. So I'm very proud of her. She has endured and has survived and is a warrior over several obstacles in her life, and she is doing what she wants to do. So I'm very proud of her. And she was a Wellness Court graduate. So these are things that we provide with Healing to Wellness Court. Just as a reminder, these are some TLPI events that are coming up. We will be at the RISE 22, which is the NADCP National Drug Court Conference in Nashville. We will be providing the tribal track as well as the Native forum, the tribal forum. And then we have our own Healing to Wellness Court enhancement training September 26th and 28th. So I invite you all to come to New Mexico. We will be at the Isleta Conference Center. That's the Isleta Pueblo. We are currently open in, I believe registration will be available soon, but we have just some information. So if you all are interested in coming to New Mexico in September, right around Balloon Fiesta time, around the tail end of chili season, you're more than welcome to come to New Mexico. So Healing to Wellness Courts, you know, are a really nice mixture of that work with the judicial system and the treatment system, which normally did not, I know as a treatment provider, I did not like to go to court. I did not like to have to, you know, to go into court and face a judge, but as a wellness court practitioner, it was a great experience for me. And it's an even greater experience when I get to go in and watch other tribes do Healing to Wellness Court. It's developed of a multidisciplinary team. You have treatment, you have a public defender, a prosecutor. One of the unique things and hallmarks of a tribal Healing to Wellness Court is our incorporation and the tribe's incorporation of traditional ways, cultural teachings, or a cultural liaison, which helps to connect that individual. For those of you who are clinicians, you know that addiction not only affects the mind and body and the soul, it also affects the spirit. So if you have an individual who is struggling with an addiction, they may not be as connected to their culture, maybe as they once were, or they may not even have really any connection because they come from a family where there was multi-generational use. There was use. So a lot of these traditional themes, a lot of these cultural ways, you know, even the simple task, I'm very fortunate, very, very fortunate to have my parents still with me and to have learned a lot of what I know and I am as a Laguna woman from my parents. And the fact that I'm able to introduce myself in Laguna, the fact that I'm able to, you know, say an opening in my native language. But unfortunately, some of our clients, some of our participants, they don't have that. So Healing to Wellness Court provides us with an opportunity to take a look at our participants in a holistic way. And part of that is maybe having them engage in some cultural activity, or just, you know, even beginning. And I speak about that culture in the tribal, in the native culture, but we also need to understand that, you know, what is their culture? They may be part of the LGBTQ community, so we need to pay attention to that. They may be a faith-based community, so we need to pay attention to that. Whatever their cultural identification is how we should start with that participant. So that is one of the unique themes or key components of Healing to Wellness Court is our incorporation of culture. And it is so great to go and watch how other tribes incorporate this. Some may start off a court hearing with a smudge, which is great. I've been in those situations and it's been great. They may incorporate, they may have a tribal council person who sits on their team and, you know, provides that cultural guidance. So it can take whatever form or whatever is important to that tribe. So that is one of our hallmarks, like I said. So Healing to Wellness Court is part of the bigger umbrella of what we now term problem-solving courts or treatment courts. You know, the larger umbrella used to be called drug courts. Everything was called drug courts, and that's where they actually started. Healing to Wellness Courts kind of evolved out of the drug courts that came out of the response to the cocaine epidemic in Miami, in Dade County, in the late 80s. They were seeing a large number of individuals who were in the court system. They were individuals who were using, who maybe were addicted to cocaine, but they were also committing some criminal activity. Maybe they were shoplifting, or unfortunately for the women, they may have been involved in some kind of sex work or prostitution, or they were doing nonviolent crimes. So there was an increase, and they needed to do a response. So at that time, treatment was, we weren't able to keep these individuals in any time in any long-term kind of counseling or treatment or therapy kind of sessions. And we as clinicians, we know the longer we can keep someone engaged in a treatment or a counseling relationship, the better outcomes we have. But we weren't able to do that because they might have just come in, they might have been court ordered. When I had court ordered clients as a clinician, they would come in, they would do an assessment, they would do an intake, and then they wouldn't come back for their first session. They might come back one or two, but they wouldn't come back for the duration of their probation. And then I, as a clinician, would have to go back and tell the court, hey, and then, they would then get stuck in the court system because they now had a non-compliance and they just never got out of it. So healing to wellness courts, problem-solving courts, treatment courts, drug courts wanted to prevent that progression and wanted to prevent that progression towards jail or prison for these non-violent offenses. So they developed one, and it seemed to take off. And around the early 90s, tribal communities started to hear about this. They may have heard about it because in neighboring non-tribal jurisdictions, some of their tribal members may have been in that system and may have been engaged in that programming. And so they decided, tribal leaders got together and said, hey, we can do this. This is something that we can do. However, it shouldn't be called drug court. We need to take a look at the path that someone is going through. And it's really truly a healing to wellness path. You start off with that healing of just being engaged. It's also a nation building. It's a team building format, because unfortunately, sometimes we work in silos. I remember when I worked for behavioral health, even though social services was right across the hall from me, they had their own way of doing things. And then also the local mental health program, they have their own way of doing things. Wellness courts bring us together as a multidisciplinary team. And the goal is the participants that we have in wellness courts. So the court part of it is a non-adversarial approach, whereas some of those sentences are held in abeyance, or they are they're put on hold upon successful completion of a wellness court program. And so, you have those two things that are running parallel, but now you're bringing someone into this treatment court model with this group of people who is there to support, who is there to provide guidance, who is there to provide supervision at times, and get them through this process. When I worked for my wellness court, we had a saying. Anytime someone new was coming into the wellness court, the team would get together and we would tell them, it's no longer you by yourself against your addiction. You now have this team of people. And the team of people was a judge, the public defender, the prosecutor, the probation officer, a community member or a tribal elder, treatment, and sometimes we would have social services. So this would be the team, and we would tell them, these are your people. These are who are behind you now to help you with your addiction. And so it's, it's a really moving process. So, as I'm working in tribal communities, not only my own community, at that time when we first started our Healing to Wellness Court, alcohol was the primary drug of use. We had some meth use, some individuals who were coming in with meth. And then we also had some individuals who, of course, were coming in with some marijuana use, but primarily the most used drug was alcohol. And just to let you know, I come into the field, I'm a licensed clinician. I come into the field not from a recovery background. I come in from an educational background. My mom was a drug and alcohol abuse counselor for 35 years, so it's kind of our family business. But that was our primary, kind of one of the things that we were working with. And as Healing to Wellness Courts have evolved and have kind of grown, some of the work I'm doing now with the tribes, I'm hearing fentanyl is hitting their communities. And even in my own community, I just learned recently of 2 overdose deaths within our community. So we were not unscathed by the opioid epidemic, which is, just was awful. We had individuals. There is a community, a tribal community in the northern part of New Mexico, Powake Pueblo. They have a tribal Healing to Wellness Court. And that part of New Mexico has had, even before we were made aware of the opioid epidemic, they have just been fighting the battle against heroin and, all the other opioids for a very long time. And so I'm really proud of that program, because one of the things that they've done is that their tribal leadership is totally on board. They now have a sober living facility, or sober living. It's like an apartment complex that is very close to the court that they can utilize for their Healing to Wellness Court participants, as well as other individuals in need. And so they've responded in that way. Another response that Healing to Wellness Courts have also provided is the acknowledgement and the use of medically assisted treatment. These are things like Suboxone or methadone or Vivitrol, some of those things that help to work with individuals, because if anybody, and from my experience, I don't have, excuse me, I don't have that direct experience of working with someone, who has this, with the current fentanyl issue. I've had a couple of clients who were addicted to the prescription medication, and it was such an interesting, they were so interesting as compared to some of my other clients, who were primarily addicted to alcohol. Just the whole dynamics of them wanting to get their drug of use. And so oftentimes individuals who are in Healing to Wellness Courts or drug courts, who have an opioid addiction, may come in through the criminal justice system, for crimes, nonviolent crimes such as shoplifting, maybe burglary. Sometimes I've also seen some identity theft cases, some embezzlement cases in some tribal communities. Those kind of, where they're stealing or trying to feed their habit. Sometimes you may also have someone who is a kind of they may be dealing they may not be dealing their drug abuse. They may be dealing another drug to support their habit. So these are ways that individuals will sometimes come into a problem solving or a healing to wellness court. And so we need to take a look at, we need to look at them holistically. So unfortunately, sometimes in tribal communities, we don't readily have the detox facilities that individuals like this may need. I worked with a tribe where the nearest detox facility is 2 hours away. And so unfortunately, these individuals, if they're in a detention system or detention setting, they sometimes are left to detox while in detention. And once they're out, we might lose them. So the need for us to get in there immediately and kind of, speak with them and let them know that there's another option. But it's also collaboration with the criminal justice system, working with the prosecutors and the public defenders as a team, as allies, to let them know about our Healing to Wellness Court, letting them know that, this is a good option, that, we can work with them. And also if we're available to, or if it's available to provide them with medically assisted treatment. That is one of the things that has kind of shifted, as I've noticed and been doing work in Healing to Wellness courts and drug courts or problem solving courts, is that in the, probably in the beginning, there was kind of this, you can't come into wellness court because, you have to go and do a methadone or you have to go and do, but now the national standard is that we should allow these individuals, because if we looked at drug addiction, alcohol addiction, the same way and respond to it the same way we would respond to a medical issue, it would be a no-brainer. We would say, yes, they need this medical attention because they have this issue that needs this, and this will help them. So, changing that mindset of that addiction is a disease and we should respond to it as such. So we do have now a national standard that lets us know. And when I'm referring to national standards, I'm referring to those that are put out by the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. They do a lot of research. They do a lot of development. And this is one of the things that they've been researching is drug courts with medically assisted treatment. I do know of a very promising program up in northern Michigan. The Saginaw Chippewa are doing a really good job. They are very progressive in a sense that they have I want to say it's a physician's assistant who is specialized in addiction medicine, sits on their team, sits on their Healing to Wellness Court team, because opioid addiction is an issue for them up there. Another program in Michigan, the Sault Ste. Marie, where they have a family Healing to Wellness Court program, have incorporated a program to work with mothers who are addicted to opioid products. They bring that person in to help them during that transition. So, wellness courts are just right there. They're right there in offering and providing the assistance to the participants that they need. I've also worked with wellness courts that are now incorporating peer recovery support specialists as part of their teams. Like I mentioned, I don't come from a recovery background as a drug and alcohol abuse counselor. I don't know personally what it is like to have the cravings at 3 a.m. or to have that urge or to be white knuckling it from one day to the next. I don't know that. But I do know of individuals, peer recovery support specialists, or whatever they may be called in your own individual states, that can provide that support, where they can work in alliance with the clinician, where they can work in alliance with the Healing to Wellness Court and help them through that period of time. Like I mentioned earlier, a very dear friend of mine is a peer recovery support specialist here in the state of New Mexico. And she is an individual who for years lived out on the streets in Albuquerque. Her primary drug use was alcohol, and she didn't want to come back to tribal lands because she thought everybody knew her. So she stayed on the streets in Albuquerque. So she was, you know, I hesitate at saying this, using this term. She was homeless by choice because she had a home here. She had homes here in our tribal lands that she could come to. But because of her addiction, she chose to stay on the streets in Albuquerque. And it took her a while. She has 3+ years of sobriety. She's got her kids back. They're all adults now, but she's got really good connections to them. She just had a birthday on Sunday, and she's doing great. She's doing great. But she is also one who knows how to speak and talk with those with individuals going through that. She knows how to offer support. She knows that. But she also knows how to work in alliance with a counselor or a Healing to Wellness Court program. So that is one of the things that is one of the ways that Healing to Wellness Courts and problem solving courts are utilizing in their response to opioids, and then, you know, all other drugs of use that our participants are going through. Really, that's just kind of what I wanted to let you know about the state of how Healing to Wellness Courts are working and how we're responding to, you know, the opioid epidemic. It did hit. Every time I get on Zoom or I get the opportunity to go into a community and we ask what the drug of use is that they're dealing with right now, you know, they'll tell us, you know, we still have a fair number of individuals who are addicted to alcohol, but our opioid numbers are increasing. Our fentanyl numbers are increasing. We just had a fentanyl death like last week or 2 weeks ago, or, you know, we've had this many in our community. So it's hitting us hard. And so this is how some of the wellness courts are responding. Anybody have any questions, comments? Yes.
Christina, could you talk about the duration of the Healing to Wellness Court from start to finish, sort of what the duration of the commitment for the patient is?
So it varies from tribe to tribe based on their tribal law and order code. So, for example, I'll use my tribe as an example. So we had 5 phases. We had an orientation phase, which an individual one was just getting used to the program. That was 30 days. We didn't, you know, really all we expected of that individual during that time was to show up to court, show up to treatment, show up for, you know, whatever else we wanted them to show up. And as you move into the other phases, it was really important for us to include an aftercare phase. And this is something that I'm noticing a lot of Healing to Wellness Courts are also doing, is to provide that kind of transition from all of the support that they've been getting for this amount of time. So An average healing to wellness court lasts anywhere from 1 year to which is 12 months to 18 months is the longest that I've seen it. Okay. Again, we are working in collaboration with the tribal justice system. So we also have to remember that there are time limits on the amount of time that they may have jurisdiction over that individual. However, we are sovereign nations, and that's why I say it varies from tribe to tribe. And oftentimes a tribe may choose to do what is pre-plea, which is a diversion program. They may say, okay, if you come into healing to wellness court, when you complete this, that charge will go away. Or they may be a post-plea, which means that they are sentenced into healing to wellness court, and their sentence is held in abeyance, can be an amount of jail time, and that's held in abeyance. It's held onto the side. Upon their successful completion, they'll go back in, and once they're completed, they will they won't have, we'll say, okay, you've met all the requirements of that sentence, you're done. It is, like I mentioned before, as a clinician, I really like wellness courts because it allows us to have our clients interaction with our clients for a longer amount of time. The treatment model, which is suggested for healing to wellness court, is an IOP model, an intensive outpatient model, where we're looking at a combination of individual counseling as well as groups, supportive groups, recovery groups, psychoeducational groups, to fill all of that IOP model. And it is a model where we are, having maybe one session a week during those first few phases. And they as the client or participant progresses, their time with the individual clinician might drop off. They might transition into some treatment or therapy groups. It's also based on, assessment is a really important part of this, because we need to know what level our participants are coming in, and what they are working on. So healing to wellness courts, problem-solving courts, work really well with those individuals that we call our high risk, high need. High risk meaning they are at a high criminogenic need, or a high criminogenic risk, meaning that they have a higher risk for reoffending. They did not do well on regular supervision in the past. They were not good regular probation, did not do well with regular probation supervision. Their crimes were nonviolent, but they have a criminal history. And then we're also talking high need, where they have a substance use disorder, whereas we are assessing them, they have a higher level of need. We're talking around that ASAM level of, I want to say it's that 3, is it 3.5 or 3, where they're in that area. They're not residential, or they may. I've seen some wellness courts who have assessed an individual and they assess their need as a residential. They'll send them to residential, they'll do their time there, and then they'll come back into healing to wellness court. So it's a really nice model. It's very, and I know with the tribal community, it is pretty flexible. One, because we're sovereign nations, we can work with our tribes, and we can work with our criminal justice system. I know in non-tribal, they kind of really get hung up on the time frame that they only have this amount, this time of jurisdiction. So so it's anywhere from 12 to 15, sometimes 18 months. And wellness courts work, drug courts work. And I tell you this because I was telling Meg when I'm done with you all, I've gotta take my mom to the casino. And I look forward to that, not only because it's her time, she gets to go and hang out at the casino, but I also get to see a former client of mine. He was my very last client as a Healing to Wellness court counselor. Before I transitioned to administration, my boss told me she didn't want me to do any more counseling, but he was my very last client. And I told her, I said, okay, I just need to get him through wellness court. So can I do that? So he was my last client. He completed wellness court, and every time one of the most recent times that I saw him, he came up to me and he told me, I have 7 years of sobriety. And he looks good, he looks great. And he thanked me. He said, thank you, Chris. And I said, I didn't do anything. I said, that was all you. I was just there to kind of push you, kind of cheer you on, kind of remind you. But he looks great. So, though that's why I know wellness courts work, is because I'm very fortunate. I get to see some of my former clients. I know wellness court works because it saved my friend's life. She is now a productive part of the community, and she wants to give back, and that's what she's doing. So do you have any other questions?
We do have a question in the chat. Someone asked if you could discuss different referral processes that
Great.
tribes might adopt.
Good question. So like I said, we're working with a high risk, high need population. So these are individuals who are coming through the criminal justice system initially for nonviolent offenses. But also we have other models of healing to wellness court. We have a family healing to wellness court model in which we are working with parents who are working in the child welfare system. So there's an existing child welfare case. There may be a removal of children. Parents are currently using. They may have had some previous child welfare encounters, and this is kind of like the kitchen sink, or where you're putting individuals who you're saying, okay, and it works just as well. So you can have individuals who are in that realm as well. In some tribal courts, it's seen as a civil case, and in some, it's seen as a criminal case. Because I remember we took in individuals from they were charged with maybe child endangerment or child neglect, but they also had an open child welfare case. We put them in wellness court. The nice thing about that is reunification of children with their parents or parent happens faster. And it's also great because the longer they stay in the wellness court program, you can continue to offer support and continue to kind of see how that transition is happening. We had an individual who, along the way, we did a reassessment of this individual. She needed to go to inpatient treatment. She was at a good place. We could then allow her to take her children with her. We found a treatment center that was able to where she could take her children. She was able to take her children, and they could go to treatment together. She came back and she finished wellness court. So so you can have it that way as well as a child welfare case.
It sounds to me like there are an awful lot of stakeholders in building up a healing to wellness court. Could you kind of list who all the stakeholders might be that would have to come together?
So it's a multidisciplinary approach, as I mentioned. So you have this multidisciplinary team that deals and works with and handles the day-to-day things of the participant. And that team includes the judge, prosecutor, public defense, if that community has public defender or a public defense advocate, treatment, law enforcement. Law enforcement is a very valuable resource in a wellness court. Sometimes individuals will include social services, a tribal liaison, or a tribal elder. They are our connection to the rest of the community. Now that's the core team. These are individuals, like I said, who work with the day-to-day happenings of the participant. And then we have the larger advisory group, steering committee type kind of group, where you can include tribal administration, you can include department heads, you might want to include, like your social services director or manager, your behavioral health manager, any other kind of, if IHS is your primary source of mental health counseling, you would include them as part of that. Part of, again, the judicial side of it, judges and court administrators. But it's really getting that advisory. In some wellness courts, I've even seen alumni, former Healing to Wellness Court participants sit on that advisory. You can gain a wealth of information from those individuals. They can tell you, yeah, I remember when you guys put in this, requirement for wellness court, it's really interesting to hear their perspective from a graduate. So you have those individuals who work and do the day-to-day, and then you have those who are kind of an advisory committee.
I was also wondering, and thank you for your presentation. Yeah, diversionary programs I think are great, but like you said, they're not going to necessarily work for everybody. Are you also seeing a prolific increase in programs like in jails for treatment, MAT and otherwise, and programs or like recovery pods and programs to help people, when they're coming out of the criminal justice system, to help with reentry and connection to services and things like you're talking about?
Right. Yeah, there are some tribes that have reentry programs, and they might use the wellness court model. But you're right. Wellness court is not for everybody. Wellness court is really designated for those individuals, like I said, high risk, high need. So if you have someone who has a low risk, they have a low criminogenic need, but they have a high need, a high clinical need, wellness court might not be for them. We are now seeing tribes who are looking at doing tracks with their wellness court. So this track serves those low risk. They come in maybe first time offense, second time offense. They don't have a great criminal history, but they've got some need. So they're still maybe under some jurisdiction of the court, but they don't need a lot of supervision, or they don't need a lot of just, every day. So courts can develop a program for them and, assist them. Strong caution. If you are a tribe considering to do that, do not mix risk levels. Mixing risk levels is pretty dangerous. A colleague of mine likes to say risk can be contagious. So if you're high risk, high need person who now is in a situation with a low risk, high need, they'll tend to gravitate towards them and possibly, prey on them. So strong word of caution, do not mix your risk levels. So this is why it's also really important for courts and tribal courts to take a look at risk assessments, knowing the risk level of your individuals before you're bringing them into a healing to wellness court or drug court situation is also really important, as well as a good clinical as a good clinical evaluation. I'm old school still. I really still like a good 2-hour biopsychosocial interview where I get to sit and ask all of these questions and, listen to the person tell their story. But knowing what their clinical need is, because we don't want to, first thing we want to do is we don't want to do any harm, but we also want to pay attention to any possible trauma issues. This is why in some wellness courts, they may not mix groups. They may not have mixed gender groups because you have some, females, or you may have some individuals who have some trauma issues, and mixing gender groups would be traumatic, would be causing some more trauma. So it's really important to pay attention to those things.
Thank you.
We have a couple of other questions in the chat. Kathy asked if you have experienced any issues related to professional cultural differences between treatment professionals and legal professionals. And I guess my assumption would be that there is going to be some tension there, but maybe you've found a way to bridge that.
So Kathy just named one of our top 3 topics that we provide as a TTA provider, which is team dynamics and team roles. It's so funny because I was guilty of doing this too. When I was a probation, I've always been a clinician, but when I was a probation officer, I had to remember my role as a probation officer, not a clinician. But that did not stop me from telling the clinician, this person needs to go to treatment. They need to go to residential treatment. So all of a sudden on a Healing to Wellness Court team, sometimes everybody becomes an immediate clinician, and they start to tell treatment what that person needs. So yes, there is. And then remember, we're not only mixing disciplines, but we're mixing personalities. So a team is not just the job that they are or the role that they are on a Healing to Wellness Court, they're that individual. So in some communities, you may have the tribe that got the grant, and the grant came to the tribal court. But there wasn't a conversation with behavioral health before that. So now they're saying, okay, hey, you guys need to come over here and do treatment. So strong recommendation, if you are considering a Healing to Wellness Court, let everybody know. TLPI and NADCP have several resources that you can provide to individuals to say, this is wellness court. My wellness court was a little bit different. I heard about wellness courts, read a lot of their beginning information. And when I became a probation officer, I went into my judge and I said, here, sign this. We're all going to drug court training. Very fortunate that the judge was, pretty calm about it. He signed off on everything and let us go. But it really should be a collaborative effort from day one and letting everybody know what wellness court is. So yes, there have been some issues, a lot about staying in your lane and being respectful of the expertise that we bring to the table as different practitioners. And then the next question I see is, have you seen participants that have significant cognitive delays be successful in wellness court due to the structure of the program, or do they struggle? And has there been an alternative referral? Great question. Yes, I have. In my experience as a Healing to Wellness Court practitioner here in my home community, we had an individual who had a traumatic brain injury, and his brain injury happened late adolescence, like 18, 19. And he was now, I want to say he was in his mid 30s when he came into Healing to Wellness Court. So he had learned, he had some delays. We had to make some special adaptations for him when we did manualized treatment of book work. He had to sit with his individual counselor to make sure that, he understood it. But he did great. He finished wellness court. He is the primary caretaker of his children who are now adults. And I've seen him in the community, and he's got grandchildren now. So yes, the structure does provide, it is really good for individuals. Once again, I'm going to go back to the initial assessment of assessing how severe is that cognitive delay or that cognitive impairment. Because one, we don't want to do harm. And yes, there should be alternative referrals. We shouldn't deny them treatment. They just might not be a good fit for wellness court, but they should not be denied treatment. So I am going to be a broken record and say assessment is your best way. So I'm going to share my last promo slide. And okay, this is us at TLPI. We have a wellnesscourt.org or wellness@TLPI is our email address. That is, you can get to us directly. This is who we are. We are a nonprofit out of West Hollywood, California. However, we have TLPI staff throughout the country. And please visit us if you are going to the NADCP conference. We will be there. And if y'all want to come to New Mexico, more than welcome you for our conference in September. And I want to thank Meg and Steve and the people at the center for inviting me. And for those of you who didn't know, I was a mentor. I was a mentor, and I was also a mentee in the Leadership Academy a few years ago. So it's really nice. And now we're partners. So it's really nice to continue this relationship. Thank you.
Maria asked if you can repeat the conference title for September.
Sure.
And while you're pulling that up, I have put the links to the Tribal Law and Policy Institute and the NADCP in the chat there.
There you go. So it is at www.enhancementtraining.org. And at that link, you will see our enhancement page. It's got the save the date. It's got information. I believe right now we're still in negotiating and doing a registration site, working with a third-party registration site. So that's something, our registration should go out soon.
Do we have any other questions? Well, I think that we are done with questions, it looks like. Thank you so much, Christina.
You are
for
very
being
welcome.
with
Thank
us
you for
today.
having me.
It's really impressive work that you're doing, and the fact that it works is
Yes,
just fabulous.
it does. drug courts, healing to wellness courts work.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
For everyone else, we are a little ahead of schedule, but I think we will go ahead and take a break right now, because I know some people will have other things that they have to get to and will have to hop off. And for those people, I'm putting the Gipper link in the chat if you would take a few moments and fill that out for us. We would greatly appreciate it. When we come back, we have some topics to discuss from the registration questions as usual, and we will cover those when we come back. What do you think, Kathy? About 15 minutes? Okay. So thank you all for being here. And if you can stay, that's fabulous. And we will see you back in 15 minutes and we'll do our discussions. Thank you.
Hi, this is Andrea from Hopi Behavioral Health. I'll go first. I started this job in late December, January, so I hit the ground running. But what we've been doing is I partnered with our local EMS, and we've been providing the Narcan presentations and information about medication-assisted treatment that's available here at Hopi. Right now, it's an Hopi Healthcare Center is an IHS facility. They're only approved to provide buprenorphine. Our community is not very well versed in the impacts of opioids. We've had a couple of deaths by overdose, but they were, because we're so remote, a lot of our young adults don't like to stay here. A lot of our young families travel back and forth to border towns or the Phoenix area. The closest small town is called Winslow, corner of Winslow, Arizona. That's 63 miles south of us. Flagstaff is 100 miles south west of us. So the impacts that we're seeing are right now are our families and individuals are that are coming back and forth from the communities. The deaths that occurred happened off the reservation. So right now, a bulk of our work has been the awareness piece. But I would like to hear from other programs, their activities and what they're implementing regarding harm reduction and any other ideas on how to get the messaging across regarding medication-assisted treatment. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm Andrea. Did I say that? I'm Andrea from Hopi Behavioral Health. I'm a substance abuse clinician.
This is Charlotte Firmino Sparks, Tribal Health in Reno. I'm kind of having a similar problem. I put a chat in the box regarding the community still having a significant resistance to harm reduction and seeing it as a way for people to continue using and not as a method to forge a path to recovery. So that's been my struggle as well, like, getting it out there. I'm even having problems with the sheriff's office kind of sharing information and wanting to be involved in it.
Charlotte, do you mean that the sheriff's office does not want to be involved?
Does not want to.
Okay.
They do not want to suggest that there's options for those in recovery that are struggling with opiates. And even here at the clinic, it's some resistance. It's a new kind of theory, I guess. And the one way I've been getting the word out is I'm going to every agency in the community, whether it's social services, education department, Head Start. I'm just putting it out there what we're offering. And then I'm hoping that along the way, the news will trickle down, and that'll be a good gateway for somebody to become, more interested in it.
We've had this, this is a very common issue because this has come up in previous meetings. And in one of our recent meetings, someone, and Kathy probably remembers who, mentioned that they ended up rephrasing and instead of using harm reduction or instead of talking about medication assisted treatment, or MOUD. They just called it medicine. So the framing it so that the addiction is a disease, and the harm reduction or medication assisted treatment is actually the treatment for it, for the disease, and making it a medical problem more than a drug use problem.
A drug replacement. It was Sandra Ortiz from Idaho.
I knew you would remember. You're good at that.
And she's fantastic. And I know Robin has worked with this as I don't know if Beth is still here, but I know Robin does this too. So I think this is maybe we could talk about that. You know, how do you marry prevention ideas with treatment ideas? Because there's a lot of good, like raising awareness, providing education for your community, reframing the conversation to a medical versus a willpower issue within the communities and within families. Because there is a lot of damage that happens with people with opioid use disorders in the community and with their families. So it's helping people understand and depersonalize it. Like it's not, people aren't purposefully trying to hurt you when they're actively involved in an addiction process, that they don't have control over their brains in the way that when they're sober. And then tying it to a medical condition versus a willpower or they're a bad person kind of condition. Yeah.
I mean, that would be, for me, I think that would be a place that we could start at. And unfortunately, some people still don't see it as a medical issue either. But I mean, that would be some place to start. So, you know, one thing I've looked into is just bringing somebody in and talking about not necessarily harm reduction, but the benefits of pursuing other alternatives for treatment, and just give examples of how those have been successful by bringing people in to the, you know, from the community that have been doing harm reduction, whether it be for alcohol or however. So
yeah, the best, one of our grantees over that's exactly what they did. They brought in a key person within their tribal community who could speak to them about the benefits of being more open-minded to alternative types of avenues towards recovery. And also data. I think Will and Paul, you guys you just recently put out a data sheet on this that might be helpful in trying to educate people regarding what the TOR grantees have, or the granting or the grant monies for TOR have accomplished. And that was a nice little handout you can use to help people understand the scope of trying to address this and what are some of the outcomes. I don't know if we have that handy or if you've already seen it, but I thought that was yeah. Okay, well, let's see if we can find it.
I
okay.
can put up a link to where we posted that when it came out. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
As I read it, I was thinking that's helpful information. Yeah, and the bottom line is that, and this comes from one of the tribal elders that I spoke with, who's very much a supporter of, and that's Jason Gomez up in Washington State. He is a great guy to talk to about this because he does a lot of presentations in his community regarding this, and his primary message is if you know you want to prevent an overdose or somebody's death. So So you can, I'm pretty sure Jason would be fine. He comes to our care and share meetings, and he regularly presents his program and what he's doing to address this. Sandra is a really good person to talk to. Beth, I think, is also good. Robin is here. Maybe Robin, you could say a few words. No, it's not your favorite thing to do, but just from the medical side of things. But there's a lot of grantees doing some pretty good work out there with this issue.
And Paul, I don't know if you want to share about the harm reduction event we're planning. I know, yeah, you mentioned the profile, Kathy. I know, we haven't to this point really advertised harm reduction so broadly in TOR, but going forward, there's going to be a much greater emphasis on it. So the next version, the next time we release one of these profile documents, hopefully we'll have a nice, broad harm reduction section to share. But I know Paul's been doing a lot of work to put together a big event for later in the summer. So I don't know, Paul, if you want to share any information
Yeah,
about
I
that.
can just mention that. Yeah, all the grantees will be getting notice probably within a week or so. We decided to have just kind of a 2-day event that really just focused on harm reduction kind of 101. But one of the themes is certainly kind of overcoming that resistance that's out there, in this country generally, and certainly within different cultures out there. And we're going to be basically highlighting people from the AIN community that have been doing this work for a long time, that can talk about kind of the practical aspects of setting up whatever type. The topics are basically, other than the first and last, the kind of major harm reduction strategies, MAT, Narcan, naloxone, fentanyl testing strips, and what am I missing? I think we're going to roll in a discussion on the end, kind of on where we're going, where to go kind of next, and then how the federal government can help tribes that are doing this work. We'll talk about safe consumption sites. Probably have a presenter just to talk about how effective they are in other countries where they are being tried. Syringe exchange, that was the other one. So yeah, and then just going back real quick, in my experience in the work with my community and overcoming that resistance, which is still a process. It's education, talking to people politely, not arguing with them, coming at them with facts about, first of all, saving lives. A dead person cannot recover. I know we've talked about that here. Talk about the health cost savings, things like syringe exchange programs have a tremendous return on investments in terms of preventing disease and minimizing healthcare costs. And then there's that connection aspect where every time when you do these programs, you can connect with people who need help often, and although they may not be ready to get help right away, many times eventually they become ready to get help, and then they know where to go. They have a name, they have a number, and they can reach out. And so there are studies that show that harm reduction creates that connection, which allows more people actually to get into treatment and recovery than would otherwise be the case. So those are kind of the three main things I talk about.
And I'm going to piggyback on that. If you can find somebody in your community that has recovered and wants to talk to people about their story, it's pretty powerful. one of our participants in one of our meetings actually told his story, and he basically said he had overdosed 4 times, and if it weren't for Narcan, he wouldn't be here. And he started to get emotional about it, and it really hit home, that personal story combined with the data and the positive sides. But I also think if you address what people are concerned about, I think Steve's kind of putting a thing in there. So like, ask the question, is harm reduction really condoning ongoing use? You know, just throw that out there. And then what is the evidence of that? And then bringing in somebody who is the beneficiary of harm reduction approaches is also really helpful. Just to have a personal story from somebody from their community that can tell their story of recovery.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kathy. I mean, storytelling is always powerful, and that's something that's kind of hard to argue with.
So another question I'm also wondering, like, how do you kind of help, like the doctors here kind of struggle with it just because the liability factor administering like Suboxone or another medication. So is there any suggestions on how to ease their concerns about the liability, such as research or anything that I can suggest for them to review to ease some of those concerns?
Well, and this is Will, hello, and yeah, if they're, you know, interested in hearing more, learning more, SAMHSA has something that's called the Providers Clinical Support System. You know, we have a network of physicians who are already prescribing these medications, you know, who have expertise and who can do one-on-one consultations, you know, and hopefully address some of the concerns that, you know, doctors in your community might have. And I can point you to that resource. It's totally free. You know, it's a SAMHSA funded resource. It's the same kind of organization that provides the trainings for Suboxone prescribing. So I'll paste a link to that in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are thousands of doctors that do that now, and it kind of went through the same issue with naloxone and Narcan, you know, a few years ago, where people were afraid of some kind of liability issue. I've never heard of a doctor getting sued for prescribing either at this point, but I understand that it's a concern out there.
They're okay with the I mean, the Narcan, they seem to be open to that. Not in every agency, but like having it on hand, but a majority, yes.
So is it that they're prescribing Suboxone? Is that the main issue? It's not the Narcan?
The Narcan, they're like I said, they're pretty much open to, and I think it's just because, once again, I think it's a lot of maybe not maybe some education issues or maybe giving some different scenarios. I think it is great to have somebody come in from the community to talk about it, you know, and that's really where I think it would best be fit. But I think where I'm going with it is just kind of going, like I said, to every community and just kind of giving out little bits and sending out little emails with informative things and just keeping that conversation going. And one day I'm hoping that everybody will be on board for like more significant harm reduction methods than just that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that harm reduction encompasses more than medication, for sure.
the fentanyl test strips right now are just like a absolute taboo. So we're trying to work on that too.
One of the talking points that Sean Bear, our co-director at the Native Center for Behavioral Health, uses in trying to get people to understand the concept of harm reduction is a seatbelt in a car. A seatbelt is not going to guarantee that you won't get injured in a car wreck, but in most cases, it will reduce the harm that you would experience if you are in a car accident. And nobody objects to putting on a seatbelt as a safety measure. And if you can come up with more examples like that about how we implement harm reduction techniques in our everyday lives, then it might help take the stigma away from when you're dealing with drug addiction. Because in drug addiction, from what I've learned from being part of this group, is that the stigma attached to drug use is much greater, and people think they label people who have addiction or substance use disorders as addicts instead of focusing on the condition. So the stigma is against the person instead of against the condition. But there's no stigma about wearing a seatbelt in a car. And it's the same thing. You're trying to reduce harm.
I like that analogy.
Another one I've heard recently that I like is, if you have a bar in your community, that's a safe consumption site. That's harm reduction. I mean, how many people have been cut off or had their keys taken away, a cab called for them, and probably even, eventually got some help. So that one always that one has made an impression on me because I never thought of it that way.
Thank you.
Charlotte, where are you from?
The Reno Sparks Indian Colony in Reno, Nevada.
Ah, okay. Thanks. Just curious. Having a hard time with this mute button today. What's our time frame today? How are we doing with time?
We are still 15 minutes ahead.
Okay. All right. So so basically we have 15 minutes left. Is that what you're saying?
Unless you are, and the group is ready to move on, and we can have Will do the updates and then give people back 15 minutes of their day.
Okay. So maybe we'll approach it that way. Any other needs, comments? I call it hopes, wishes, and dreams, although I'm not sure this avenue is the right place for that. But any other things that people are interested in? And did we answer any questions? Did we forget anybody's questions? I'm looking to see if anyone had a question that we missed. But if people could let us know if you're ready to move on or you have something more to contribute, that would be fine too. Okay, we've covered, we've covered the culture with harm reduction. A little bit about, well, mostly focused on medication-assisted care. Gave you some resources. We are sensitive about giving people's emails out, but Meg put in where to find Sandra, Jason, and Beth. If you want to contact them through their tribal affiliation. Okay. Right now, I'm staring at a lot of blank squares, except for Robin and the folks from the center or Santa. So unless you speak up or you turn your camera on if you can, I'll give it a few seconds, but we'll go ahead and move on. Hollywood blank squares. Yeah. It's always intimidating to me to see names but no faces. It intimidates me. Although I appreciate it when people do put their camera on when they're asking a question or making a comment. Yeah, okay. Well,
So
let's
if
go ahead and move on then, because
Will has some GPO updates, I believe.
Yes, I do. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I just have a couple brief updates. These are things you likely already know just from having calls with us, but some of these things might apply to your grant, some might not. It just depends on what what year you're in of your grant. So the new TOR grant, the FY22 Notice of Funding Opportunity was posted on April 27th. And so, that's out right now. It will be posted for 60 days. The deadline is coming up to submit an application for that. It's actually on Monday of next week. So if you were funded in 2021, then you are not eligible to apply for this current opportunity, but you'll be eligible next year. The way it works is you can't really get TOR grants in 2 consecutive years. But if you are, nearing the end of your grant or you're in a no cost extension, then, definitely consider applying. I'm sure you all, already heard about this, hopefully, since, there's only a week left. But please, reach out to one of us if you have any questions. We did a whole webinar going over the new funding announcement. And, I encourage you to take a look at that on our website. And if you are in the final year of your grant, if you're in year 2, and you think you may need some extra time, then what you'll have to do is request a no-cost extension. So if you're in year 1 of your grant, this won't apply to you yet, but this is if you're in year 2 and your grant is scheduled to end in September. So you may request or apply for an extension to your grant of up to 12 months. And this is supposed to be submitted no later than 60 days prior to the end of the grant, which would be July 31st. And we ask you to submit these requests through ERA. If no cost extension is submitted, then your project end date will be September 29th, and then we'll get into closeout. That's something we'll talk about. If you are not planning to do a no cost extension and you're just going to close out the grant, we'll have a separate guidance to cover that. You'll get plenty of emails from us with those instructions, but we will also be issuing guidance, sending emails very soon with instructions on the no cost extension. Back at the beginning of April, we launched a new GPRA tool. So this replaced the 3-question naloxone tool. There's 2 parts of GPRA. One is that client interview. The other was the naloxone tool, which some of you maybe were doing if you were purchasing naloxone with your grant. So what we're talking about here, this replaces that tool. It's 12 questions now, including questions on overdose reversals, fentanyl testing strips, education of youth, first responders, key community sectors, and outreach activities. So this information, this data is due quarterly in SPARS. And we had a training webinar, and that, and also some other supporting documents are uploaded to SPARS if you have any questions about that. And you can also reach out to any one of us, me or Brittany or Paul, and we'll be happy to help you. And then we always just like to remind you of the GPRA client level data collection, and that requirement. If you are providing any client level treatment or recovery support services through the grant, we ask you to complete these GPRA interviews with clients that get that grant funded service. So you should be completing the interview at intake, and then again for the 6-month follow-up, and then there's a shorter set of questions at discharge. And when you collect that data, you should upload it into SPARS. And we have the SPARS contact information. And here's just a brief look at some of the upcoming webinar that we have planned for next week, and then some of the recent webinars that were held. So all of these are listed on the TA Center's website, so you can find the recordings there. Next week we'll be having a presenter talk about trauma and supporting staff who may be experiencing vicarious trauma. And then if you aren't already having calls with your GPO on a regular basis, please reach out to us so we can set those up, so we can keep in touch about your grant. And then here is our contact information in case you want to reach one of us. And I'll be sharing these slides with Meg, and she'll send them out to everyone. So that was it, just short updates. So thank you everyone for your attention.
Thank you, Will. Are there any final thoughts or questions? Anything you want to have the group discuss? We really appreciate you being here. I know it's summertime, so there's sort of that vibe, right? Where you just kind of want to be on vacation. We appreciate the work that you do all seasons of the year. If there's nothing else, then, well, let's put it to a vote. Anybody want to have an extra almost hour of their day back?
Funny. Yeah.
Does anybody not want almost an hour of their day back? Maybe that's what I should have asked.
No.
Well, Kathy, do you think you can send us off in a good way? I have put
Yes.
before you do that, I'm sorry, I have put the GPRA link in the chat again. Please take a few minutes to fill that out for us. We pay attention, and so we value your feedback.
Yeah. They're in the driver's seats about what the focus is on our meetings, for sure. Well, I want you to just pay attention to my background. I changed it for those of you who've seen me forever and a day. So that's my summertime background for you. And I hope that, I know that the country is suffering in terms of a heat wave. So if you are in that heat dome, I wish you the best to survive that. Hopefully it'll go away soon. Out here in Oregon, the sun finally came out. So it's the opposite of what the heat dome is causing for 2/3 of the country. So I wish you well, and I know in the Southwest region, it gets pretty warm. So I wish you well. Hope you have a good rest of your day. And I hope also you enjoy whatever summertime activities are that you have to look forward to. We'll hopefully see you in another context in another day. So be well, take care of yourself and each other, and thank you for attending. Yeah. Bye-bye.